Welcome everybody to a new episode of Zach's vlog. This week we are doing a question and answer session based on the questions that I received on my Instagram poll. I have a little makeshift desk set up here. We're in our little Oslo apartment and I obviously don't have a studio, so I did my best to just set up a chair and a desk in the living room. Let's get right into the questions. I want to first thank everybody for sending in the questions. I got a lot of really good ones, a lot of really silly ones. No such thing as a bad question though, isn't that what the teachers always say? We are going to be starting with a question from P_Carlin. He says, why are so many skiers doing double threshold now? I don't know that so many skiers are doing double threshold. I think for sure a lot of people on Strava are. But I think the main answer is just that it's trendy. Started with maybe Jakob Ingebrigtsen, and like a lot of trends, they either start in running or cycling and then they sort of bleed their way out into the more fringe sports like cross-country skiing. But the purported benefit of double threshold training is that you can do more total minutes of intensity split between two sessions than you would be able to handle if you just did it in one session. So say for example, I did one morning session that was 90 minutes total, so say 9 times 10 minutes. I would expect that to be a very risky session where I might be incredibly tired for several days afterwards, but what we have found is that if I rather split that 90 minutes into say 45 minutes in the morning and 45 minutes in the afternoon, my body will handle it a lot better. But it comes at a cost, right? It comes at the cost of being able to do strength in that afternoon session, which a lot of people do, especially sprinters. It comes at the cost of just doing a recovery session, and I think it can be really easy to go overboard. Next, we have a few questions from Ryan Soul Running, and he says, will Minnesota end the championship curse this year? And he didn't specify the Minnesota Timberwolves, which is the NBA team, so I'm going to assume he's talking about any Minnesota sports team, Vikings, Twins included, and I'm going to say probably not. That's just the reality. Probably not. How tall are you? I'm 6'2". Depending on who asks, maybe 6'3" or 6'4", but in reality, 6'2". How many pairs of roller skis do you have? What wheel speed do you normally use? I have 2 pairs of classic skis and 2 pairs of skate skis. One pair of skate skis that has wet wheels. They're still the standard speed, but they're a special type of rubber that helps to stick on wet pavement. And I also have a just regular pair of skate roller skis with the standard wheels. But to be honest, I use the wet wheels pretty much always, even when it's dry. For classic, I have a pair of roller skis that have 3-speed wheels, 1 step slower from the standard. So it's confusing, right? Basically, the higher the number, the slower the wheels are. 3s are what I use most of the time. And I also have a pair with 4s, which I use for, double pull workouts, or if I'm doing a really flat route and I want to add a little bit more resistance, or maybe later in the fall when these arms have gotten too used to the 3s, I can add that in for a new stimulus. I have a question here from Markomo Buvanovice, and he asks, have you ever been ski to Armenia? Not yet. Maybe one day. I don't know. There's no World Cups in Armenia, so not yet. I have a question here from Tonesethi, and he says, are you willing to do ski classics maybe someday? And I think, yes, I maybe am willing to do it someday. One of my best friends from college, Matthias Osrolid, is a member of Team Akerdali's Ski Classics team, and he has spoken really highly of it. He says it's a lot of fun, and I think actually my body type with really short legs and really stocky upper body and broad shoulders is potentially suited very well to a sport where you only double pole. And this summer, I've actually been focusing a lot more on double poling and actually doing a lot of sessions with those Ski Classics guys, and I have gotten the itch a little bit. So right now I'm skiing World Cup. I'm not sure if I would either retire or go to Ski Classics if I got sick of that, but I am definitely not ruling it out. It seems like a lot of fun. Parker McKinney 8138 asks best interval type workout. And I think that definitely depends on what type of training you're doing in the given time of year, but my favorite is intensity 3 work, or tempo work, threshold, whatever you want to call it, because I think it is a really nice way to work on technique and improve a lot of strength, but it doesn't cost nearly as much as doing intensity 4 or VO2 max or sort of, race pace stuff. So I find it is a really nice in-between zone that still lets you get a lot of quality work, but doesn't cost nearly as much as some of those harder zones. Fastest skier you've ever raced against? There's 2 ways to answer that question, right? Of course, the fastest skier I've ever raced against is Johannes Klæbo. Anybody who's entered a race with him should answer that question the same because he is the best skier of all time. But I think a more fun way to perhaps answer this question is relative to the level of skiing I was at the time, who was the best skier that I raced against? And that, I think, is either Ian Torchia when I was at NMU and raced him in the junior races. He was pretty untouchable. Or it was Vebjorn Hegdal, who probably nobody watching this video has heard of, but when he was a U20, U18 skier, was one of Norway's biggest talents. And if you actually went around and asked people at that time who was going to be the next sort of Petter Northug, great Norwegian skier, I think a lot of them would have said Vebjorn Hegdal. So he was pretty damn good. Mia de Tomaso asks favorite restaurants in the Twin Cities. I don't actually really go to like a lot of restaurants. I do a lot of fast casual stuff, like think Chipotle and stuff. My favorite sort of fast casual place that I go to all the time is called Mexico City Cafe, and it is in St. Louis Park, directly next to the track and football field by the high school. Absolutely love it. Julie and I go there all the time. Matthew Clark asks, would you rather train in 40-degree pissing rain or a 0-degree blizzard? Definitely a 0-degree blizzard, because that sounds like I'm going to get a lot less wet. He also asks, what is the best high school to college pipeline in the U.S.? And I will, of course, say Bloomington Jefferson High School to Northern Michigan University. And let's just leave it at that. Front Range Nordic asks, how can we build the sport of cross-country skiing and biathlon in the United States? The simplest thing we can do is to provide more support for professional skiers. If you're not on the US ski team, there's a really limited amount of financial support you get, and I've seen firsthand a lot of really talented skiers who were 23, 24, 25 years old step out of the sport because it was just not financially feasible for them to keep going. So I think if we can, at a minimum, fund World Cup for all US athletes who get starts on the World Cup, that would make a really big difference in making this sport sustainable for people who are trying to train 800, 900 hours a year and also be able to pay for everything. Seve de Campo asks, success in sport culture differences between USA and Norway, broadly and then in XC. Broadly in the United States, we for sure are doing well in a lot of sports, like namely basketball, football, baseball, even track and field. Yeah, I mean, really just the popular sports, right? I think it's the same story whichever country you go to. The sports that are popular are going to get the best talent, therefore are going to have the most money, the most attention, and if you're from a country that puts a lot of value in basketball and football, you're going to get a lot of good basketball and football players. And Norway, as a country, really has a sort of endurance sports culture, especially cross-country skiing, biking, running. Yeah, a lot of the most talented athletes, rather than playing basketball as they would in the US, they cross-country ski. And I think it really is that simple. Now, specifically in cross-country skiing, I think the biggest difference is just that Norwegian athletes are much more professional from a younger age. You have all these 14, 15, 16-year-old Norwegians who are going to these basically full-time sports schools, and they write their own training. They have a really good understanding of the training process and what they should do on a given day. Whereas a lot of young American athletes are sort of just still doing exactly what their coach tells them and not really thinking that much about why. But I think moreover, like I started skiing when I was 14 years old for my high school team for 4 years, and basically didn't actually start skiing seriously until, yeah, maybe my senior year of high school or when I was in college. Whereas a lot of these Norwegians I am now racing against have been more or less professional since they were 15. So I think a lot of Americans are also just behind because they started taking it seriously a lot later. Cullen Furr says, favorite race and distance? Classic sprint. Arlington Skiing 68 says, why did you leave the US ski team? I left the US ski team because I did not qualify for the US ski team, and therefore I was given the boot. It was not my choice. Victor KLN8 asks, if you aren't on the US ski team this year, who is going to pay for your prep, etc.? Will you start in World Cup? Luckily, yes, I will start in World Cup. That has nothing to do with whether you're on the US ski team or not. So I got the right to start in all races in period 1 of World Cup. So that's skate, classic, distance, and sprint. So I'm really excited about that. But unfortunately, I have to pay for everything. If you're on the US ski team, the US ski team pays for your housing, they pay for your travel, they pay for wax service, and basically any other expenses that you could think of as it pertains to being a World Cup skier. But now that I'm no longer on the team, that all falls onto me. Luckily, I have teams like Team Birkie, my professional team, who will pay for a lot of the expenses. And there's also, nonprofit organizations like the NNF who step up and help a lot. But the harsh reality is there's going to be many, many thousands of dollars that I have to pay out of pocket myself this year that I have not had to in previous years when I was on the US ski team. So, for example, I just bought my flight to Ruka, Finland, and it was like $600 for a one-way. And that's something that normally I would have just gotten expensed by the US ski team, but this year it comes straight out the bank account. So that is a little bit rough. Nathaniel Burke, 812, says, mustache, ? And no, because I can't grow one. I have no facial hair genetics, so unfortunately not. Katie Eichten says, favorite T-Wolves player of all time. That is a very easy answer, Anthony Edwards. That BP guy says, how do you motivate in downtimes? I think having goals really helps. And ideally having a lot of those goals be long-term, because week to week or month to month, things can be up and down. But if you have a goal that's set out, years in the future, or you just kind of want to keep making progress, then it can help you to sort of zoom out and see that even if today is tough, you are still making steps in the right direction long term. John Steele Hagenbuch says, what's it like being a blank?
Come on over here. Come on over here. No, you flipped me off. Come on, coward. No. Come on. You're not an intellectual. You're a fake and a fraud.
I don't know, Johnny. What's it like? You tell me. He also asked for my manscaping routine, and guess what? There is no manscaping routine, and you know that. That's why you asked the question, because I can't grow a beard or a mustache, unlike you. Good for you, buddy. Wassa Weeks 04 asks, what are your goals for this season? My biggest goal is to qualify for the Olympics, and if I manage to do that, my highlight race will be the classic sprint in the Olympics. So 2026 Olympics, they are in Cortina, Italy, and that is my goal for the season, and honestly, it's one of my biggest life goals too. So Welly Fillmore says, will you get more from running slow? I think that depends on your fitness level. I think the vast majority of recreational athletes could gain a lot from going slower on their easy stuff. Especially as skiers, running is something where going slower is almost never a bad thing, because we don't care that much about our running technique as we do skiing technique. So just going a little bit slower on running workouts is going to reduce the fatigue that comes from your, the joint impact. Really, there's not that many downsides to going slower on your runs. On your skis, sometimes you kind of should maintain a certain pace just to be able to actually ski with good technique, but I don't think that applies to running. So as a general answer, I would say yes, you will get more from running slow. Ethor Arneson asks, how many hours do you train during your biggest month, and what month is that? I would say my biggest months are usually around 90 to 100 hours, and that would be usually July and August. Cole Merrick Ski asks, what monthly, weekly, and yearly hours do you hit? How much time per zone or activity? So I would say weekly, it's anywhere from 13 or 14 hours on a really easy week to 26, 27, almost up to 30 hours on my biggest weeks. But I think in general, I try to be really consistent with my volume, so not have those super low lows and high highs, and rather sort of just stay in that 19 to 22 hour zone and just sort of rattle off good weeks. So that's kind of where I've been at for most of this summer. As for yearly hours, in the last 3 or 4 years, I've been anywhere from 775 to 850. And for me, I feel like that's a really good range where I can still have really good quality on my intervals and do a lot of sprint training, but also get that necessary L1 training to actually be a good distance skier. As for time per zone, I would say if you zoom all the way out, it's basically 90% L1 and then 10% L3 and above. Nide David asks, you racing in the Birkie trail run this year? And unfortunately not. All right, technical difficulties. My camera overheated and it's just generally tweaking, so I don't know. Gonna try to get through these last questions. Sam Schwarzenruber asks, what is your VO2 max? I don't actually test it that much. I think the highest I've ever recorded is around 80. I'm not some crazy VO2 max guy. I don't know, maybe I should do another test and I'll let you guys know, but probably anywhere from 78 to 80 something. And lastly, we have Matthias Rolled asking, what is the biggest difference between Minneapolis and Oslo? And I would say just how accessible it is via car in Minneapolis versus Oslo. In Minneapolis, you can drive everywhere. There's parking lots everywhere. If you look at Minneapolis from the sky, it's basically just one big parking lot. So you can basically just take your car everywhere. But in Norway, it's very built for pedestrians and public transportation. So driving is a pretty big pain in the ass, and you are better off taking the train or biking. So I would say that's the biggest difference. I forgot to film an outro. I think also just because my camera overheated, but thank you so much for tuning in. I think I answered pretty much everybody's questions, but feel free to always reach out via Instagram DM or whatever if you have more questions. The door is always open, but like, subscribe, and I will see you next time.